Howdy friends, welcome back to the Outpost. In today's video I'm going to show you guys out there how to change oil on one of these guys. Alright, before we get started, let me run through a couple small things that you're going to need and some things you need to know. So today we're working with the 2023 Axis 500, which is a product of Hisun Motors, which has been producing these UTVs for many years. Even though this UTV is about 2.5 years old, Hisun has made it pretty simple, generally speaking, for the most part, of keeping the setup on these things basically the same for quite a few years outside of the change of the chassis itself. Now, any of y'all out there that are viewing this video right now happen to buy this particular Axis 500 or the 700 series made by Hisun Motors, it would have came with an owner's manual in the glove box. So in retrospect, if you have one of the original owner's manuals still for your Hisun Motors or Axis 500, 700 series or what so, it will walk you through all the things that you need to find in order to change your oil. Oil types, spark plug types, where they're located on the actual UTV, as well as your oil filter. But if you don't have this owner's manual any longer, you can always look everything up on Google and find what you're looking for. All right, let's start off with the things that we're going to need today to do our oil change on the Axis 500. Start off with 3 quarts of oil. We will come back to that. An oil filter wrench, a spark plug gap tool, as well as a socket that's going to take these parts off of here, and a small funnel, as well as some sort of container to capture the old used motor oil. All right, let's jump back to that oil we were talking about. Specific oil, this is not a kind of oil that you would put in the car or your truck. It actually has to rate on this, which is API, SJ or lower, as well as JASO, MA or MA2, and let me explain to you exactly why that is. Right here on the back of this oil that we picked up to do our oil change on the Axis 500, that is the specifications that you're looking for at this time, that you cannot find this type of oil usually at an auto parts store. I had to pick it up at a motorsports store that sells UTVs as well as four-wheelers and motorcycles. The reason behind this is on a UTV, generally speaking, I can't speak for every model, the motor oil doesn't just lubricate your motor in these vehicles, it also lubricates the gears as well as several other components that are on this thing. So you can't just go out and buy regular motor oil that you're going to put in your car or your truck. All right, enough of that. On to the oil change and the spark plug change and stuff like that. It's important really to know exactly what type of oil and stuff that goes into these things. That way you're armed yourself with the best product and the best outcome when it comes to doing oil change on a UTV. All right, here we go. First thing we're going to need to do before anything is remove both the seats as well as the center console. Okay, here's the seat on the passenger side. What we need to do is take this little lever that's in the front, pull it up, and the seat will come out of here. Nice and easy. The next thing we have to do is take this center console out. Just gonna have to work it. You got the e-brake sitting up here, as well as your gear shifter. There we go. A little at a time. There we go. All right, this is what you should be seeing right now. You got the seats and the center console off. You see the gas tank there, as well as engine and stuff. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put some cardboard up underneath this hole. Now, one thing I failed to mention on this, before you start, you want to make sure that the vehicle is parked as level a position as you possibly can, and the motor isn't hot. It's at a normal temperature. First thing we're going to do is locate where the dipstick is or the oil filler is. If you look straight down there, see that black cap right there? Well, we've got a gaggle of wires that are all looped up around here. I'm going to have to snip these zip ties and get this pulled out of the way and pull this dipstick out. All right, let's go ahead and get that dipstick out. Sorry I can't give you a better camera angle. Might have to use a little pair of needle nose just to get it backed out the best you can. lot of room to work on these things. You just have to be mindful. Whatever comes out, it's got to go back in. All right, folks, that's what you have right there. That's the dipstick, the oil filler tube and stuff. We want to take that off first. Let's get up underneath this thing and let me show you where the drain bolt is. Okay, we're underneath the UTV right now, and you can see there's a large plate that covers everything. But there is your drain bolt. You can see it right there in the middle of the picture, right up through there, and that socket size is 3/4 inch. Now it's going to be pretty much impossible for me to get my camera up underneath here so you can see all the goodies. Just got to trust me that there is that bolt, that drain bolt, that plug that's up underneath this UTV. Now there's a solid metal plate under the whole chassis of the thing you can't remove, but they've left access where you can put a 3/4 inch socket up there, put your drain pan underneath, and open it up and drain your oil. There it goes. Well, there you guys have it. I drained all the oil down. It is dirty. I'm well overdue for this. These things are supposed to have a good oil change done like once every 100 miles or so because of the engine itself that's in here. I've waited to almost 400 miles, so this is definitely a good thing for this to happen. All right, this is what you're looking at. Okay, if you see this, when you take that plug off there, you know you're pulling the right plug out. That was a cap. And it's got a little induced washer with kind of like a screen in there and a spring, which goes in first and followed by that. Let's go ahead and get this back on there and put our oil inside the crankcase. All right, it's time for us to put our oil back into the crankcase by going back down here. Remember, we had a dipstick right there into that slot. Okay, in with our first quart of oil, nice and easy. All right, we're on our second quart here, nice and easy. Recommended for this particular UTV, it calls for about 2.1 quarts. So after this second quart, we're going to put our dipstick back in there and we're going to see how close we are. We still have the filter, which is right next to it, that has to come off and be replaced as well. Okay, we're 2 quarts in. Before we go any further, I'm going to take a rag and we're going to wipe around that whole drain piece down in here. Make sure we got no garbage that's going to get down into the crankcase or into the motor and all that stuff. Here's the dipstick. Let's go ahead and put that in, and then we'll jump over and work on the filter. All right, at this point, the next move is to remove our old oil filter, which is right here up top. It's right above where the dipstick and all that stuff is. We're going to have to get a wrench on there and try to get that out and put some towels around there so we can reduce the amount of oil that spills down inside of the compartment here. All right, here we go. We got a wrench on our filter. Let's see if we can back this thing off. There we go. We got some movement going on. There you go. There's the old oil filter out of the Axis 500 and stuff. Got it all cleaned up and everything. Got a replacement for local O'Reilly's, an AC Delco. Now, one thing I do want to comment on is there's nowhere in the owner's manual anywhere that states anything about the size or the specs on these. So what I had to do is look it up, Axis 500 oil filter size on Google, and it gave me a reference number, and I was able to go down to Auto Parts store and they were able to size this up and get me the direct replacement. And before we put this thing in, I'm going to add just a little bit more oil so when we fire up the UTV, it isn't dry firing and it has oil in there that can actually start circulating with things. Now let's take our new filter and let's add just a little bit of the same oil that we just used and dump some down inside of that filter. Just that way we're not dry firing anything. We're going to take a little bit of that as well and we're going to rub it around the gasket at the top so everything goes in there nice and smooth. At this point, we are ready to install this on our Axis 500. Here we go. Let's try to get this thing in there where it needs to go without making a huge mess. All right, we got it started. You see that? Let's try to tighten that as much as we can by hand. We do have oil in the area. That's why we have rags and everything. There you go. Can you see it? It's sitting right there. Now make sure when you put these on, don't over tighten them. They have a rubber gasket seal that butts up against there. It's almost like what I do for a living, for plumbing and stuff. When you have a part that has a rubber seal already on it, never over tighten it because it'll whop it out and it'll end up leaking from that position. Now it's time for us to start this thing up, let the oil circulate through this thing, get up to temperature, we'll shut it off, wait a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and we'll check our dipstick. Let's pull that dipstick back out of there and see what we're looking at for the level of our motor oil. If you all can see that or not, but it looks like it's at a steady, even level. I do have oil that's sitting right here in the comfort zone. It isn't too much, not too little. I think we got a winner right there. Let's put this back together and get this whole thing back together. That's how you change the oil and the filter on an Axis 500 UTV. Have patience with it. Don't over tighten anything. You might have to snip the little clips off there, the zip ties, to get the wires out of the way. Some tight, tricky little business there. If you forgot anything, go back and watch it on the video. Make sure to have rags to wipe up all the residual oil that might have got fallen down. You don't want to think it's still leaking where it's really not. We got one more thing to do on this project, then we'll wrap this thing up. All right, we talked about spark plug on here. I'm on the driver's side towards the back of the motor and stuff. You see my finger right here underneath what looks to be a hose. Right there is a spark plug. It's got a boot on it and stuff like that. Let me go ahead and take that off, and then we'll try to get the spark plug out, get the new one gap, put it back in, and fire this thing up, see how we're working. Okay, so we got the old spark plug out. I'm going to show that to you, but in the user manual, if you still have it, on page 8-23, the very bottom, it tells you the gapping, which is right there. See it? That you need to gap that spark plug with. Let's go ahead and take a look. Here is the old spark plug. It doesn't look like it's too bad, but it's good practice when you're doing an oil change. So go ahead and put the new one in. Here's our new one. And the listing on here for parts number, if that's what you're looking to do, is going to be a DR8EA. All right, it says it right on the end of the box. Just any of you guys are trying to find out exact specifications of what you need. It also tells that in the book what type of spark plug this particular vehicle needs to have in it. Well, hey, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks so much for hanging out and watching how to change the oil and filter on your Axis 500 UTV, as well as the bonus spark plug removal and replacement. You got to know what kind of parts go into these particular vehicles first and foremost. You got to do the research no matter what it is. The internet's an incredible tool, not to mention having the patience to get in there in those tight little areas. We had to cut some zip ties and all that stuff and pull some wires out of the way just to get in there to get the dipstick and all that other stuff. Just have patience. Got any questions or anything, or you forgot something, go back and look at it. Till next time, I'll see y'all on the Outpost.